Okay, so what happens when a YouTuber gets this wild idea to buy a supposedly demon-possessed clown doll off the internet, and then decides to live with it for 30 days? Well, that's exactly what a creator named Gavin did. He set up this whole experiment just to see if the terrifying stories that came with this old toy were actually real. So let's break down what he found. And get this wasn't just some vague, oh, it's spooky kind of thing. No, the doll came with a really chilling warning from the seller. They detailed exactly how the last owners couldn't even make it 3 days before finding their gas stove mysteriously turned on high. This sets up a very specific and honestly a very dangerous curse that becomes the first big test of this whole experiment. So the setup is pretty simple, right? You've got our investigator, Gavin. You've got the object of interest, this creepy 1950s clown doll. And you've got the challenge. He has to keep this thing for a full 30 days, way past that supposed 3-day curse, to figure out what, if anything, is really going on here. Now, the doll's given name is Zozo. And if you're into the paranormal, that name is a huge red flag. Zozo is this name that's constantly linked to a demonic entity, one that people claim to contact through Ouija boards. The seller was basically saying, hey, just so you know, that specific demon is attached to or maybe even inside this doll. And this really brings us to the million-dollar question for this whole thing. Is this just a creepy-looking toy with a fantastic backstory somebody made up to sell it online? Or is there actually some kind of malevolent, demonic entity living inside of it? Gavin was pretty determined to find out. So, did Gavin have to wait long for something to happen? Nope, he didn't have to wait at all. From the moment that doll was unboxed, weird things started to go down, kicking off the investigation with a bang almost immediately. The activity ramped up really fast over those first 3 critical days. On day 1, right after unboxing, a motion-activated cat toy, the kind with a light-up ball, starts going off on its own whenever he'd ask a question. Day 2, things get way more personal. Both Gavin and his roommate start hearing the exact same weird sound, like a metal ball rolling on the floor. And then day 3, well, that's when things seem to cross over into his own head. And we're not just talking about some vague bad dream. Gavin describes it in terrifying detail. He dreams he's locked in his room, pulling on the door, screaming for help, and then the doll literally attacks him. This moment feels like a major psychological turning point in the whole experiment. But then, after that first crazy burst of activity, nothing. It all just stops. The sounds, the gear, everything goes quiet. So Gavin gets frustrated, right? He's not getting any new evidence, so he decides he can't just sit around and wait anymore. He needs to poke the bear. He needs to provoke a reaction. So he tries a few different things to get a rise out of this doll. First, he goes with simple taunting, just insulting it. When that doesn't work, he confronts the scariest part of the legend head-on by putting the doll right on the stove. And finally, he tries to create a more supernatural vibe with some candles, hoping maybe the flames would get some kind of response. And the result of all this effort? Absolutely nothing. Zip, nada. The doll doesn't care about the insults, it doesn't turn on the stove, the candle session is a total bust, the investigation has completely hit a wall, and it's pretty clear he needs a whole new strategy. All right, so when your own methods just aren't cutting it, what do? You call in people with more experience. And this is where the story takes a huge turn. A famous witch and some professional ghost hunters enter the picture. And they offer a completely new way of looking at this. So the first expert who shows up is Patty Negri, who's a really well-known witch in the paranormal world. And she doesn't rely on all the tech and gadgets. Instead, she uses tools like dowsing rods to try and communicate with whatever spirit might be attached to this doll. And this right here is the turning point. Patty basically throws the whole initial theory out the window. She says, no, this isn't the demon Zozo. She thinks it's the spirit of a carnival worker from the 1920s, a carny named John. Her theory is that Zozo, the demon, just opened a portal, and John, who she says is more mischievous than evil, just saw an opportunity and jumped into the doll. So how in the world do you talk to a 1920s carny spirit? Well, Patty's advice is the complete opposite of everything Gavin had been doing. Instead of provoking it, she says to be nice to it. Make it feel important, make it feel happy. And her number one suggestion? Offer it a glass of whiskey. Seriously. So, armed with this totally new theory and some very interesting advice, Gavin and some other ghost hunters set up for their final, biggest experiment. They use something called the Estes method, and it's a fascinating technique designed to get rid of any bias. Basically, one person is blindfolded and wears noise-canceling headphones. All they can hear is a spirit box scanning through radio stations, and they just call out any words they hear, having no idea what questions are being asked. With the session up and running, they ask the spirit a really critical question, one that gets right to the heart of this whole mystery. How did you end up in the stall? What's your story? The response that comes through the headphones is just one single, chilling word: disaster. And that's the first real clue they get about the spirit's backstory. Okay, so that's pretty spooky. They decide to push a little harder and try to confirm who they're talking to. They ask a very simple, direct question, hoping to get a name that'll either prove or disprove the new theory. And the name that comes through? John. I mean, wow. This is a huge moment. It seems to directly confirm what Patty Negri said during her dowsing rod session. Her whole theory about a carny spirit named John suddenly feels very, very real. So the investigators start connecting the dots. They remember the doll came with this old, burnt electrical cord from a house fire. So they ask, was this cord part of the disaster? Did this cord start that fire? This is the question that could tie the whole story together. And the answer is a simple, crystal clear yes. In that one moment, the Estes method seems to have laid out the entire narrative. A spirit named John trapped in the doll after a disaster, which was a house fire started by that very cord. So, after 30 days of escalating activity, expert consultations, and this insane climactic communication session, what's the final verdict? How did Gavin make sense of all this evidence? So, what did Gavin find most convincing? You might be surprised. It actually wasn't the technology. Yeah, he ranked the dowsing rods and the crazy perfect answers from the Estes method pretty high up there. But for him, the single most compelling piece of evidence was personal. The serious negative impact that those 30 days had on his own mental health. And in the end, that's what we're left with. Was this whole thing just a wild psychological experiment? You know, just a person's mind playing tricks on them after being told to expect something paranormal? Or did this 30-day investigation actually capture a real conversation with the spirit of a 1920s carnival worker named John? I guess that's for you to decide.